Greetings. This is the commentary and sermonette on the song Faith Knows. The date I have is June 22nd, 1984, and I pretty much got this in a couple of days. Now, I've tweaked it a little bit over the years. Even this last recording, I cut out a few words here and there, but it pretty much came together in one shot. And what's amazing to me about this is with what's going on in the country and the world today, especially the last verse, it is pertinent to say the least. I want to get right on into the lyrics. Even though they're busy chasing the most pleasing of delights, laughing, living easily, seeking their own to ever greater heights, faith knows these are death's shows. Faith knows lit by death's glows. Faith knows the curtain's coming to stop the show. Faith knows the performers are on death row. I'm going to go into the second verse too, because they're tied very closely. Passion, fashion, daring and dashing, free as the breeze and goes where it blows. Pursuing these goals as though they're everlasting, and then they're quoted saying, open for anything except those square holy joes. Faith knows. Faith knows. Faith knows the curtain's coming. Faith knows. So is faith that knows things a blind faith, or is it a faith packed with information? But faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the assurance, it's the word for to stand under, of things hoped for. It's something you arrange yourself under and you stand under it. And the conviction of things not seen, conviction of pragmaton, pragmatic, of practical matters that are not seen or not yet seen. So faith is substantive. It couldn't be more substantive than what's being said in that passage. The assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. So faith knows a lot of things. And if you think about today in social media, most people that are on it are presenting a picture of themselves where they're laughing and living easily, seeking their own to ever greater heights. I think one of the Facebook founders warned of this and knew it was going to feed into people's egos. They would want to present an image of themselves that is happy and prosperous and abundant, etc. And that could have a very negative impact on people that their lives aren't that good. And the passion, fashion, daring, dashing, even when I wrote this, there were these magazines at the checkout, but now it is just everywhere. Reality shows everywhere of all of this glitter and glamour and fun. And, a lot of our minority populations have been sold this bill of goods of this thuggish stuff, and that's where it's really at. And they try to imitate them, and they don't wind up making any money. They've X'd themselves out of the system that they live in as far as being able to prosper in it. But the chorus is, faith knows these are death's shows. They're not life's shows. Jesus said, whoever's not gathering with me is scattering. Faith knows they're lit by death's glows. So they're not lit by God and the things of life. Faith knows the curtain's coming to stop the show. Faith knows the performers are on death row, because it is an act. People are acting all the time. Then passion, fashion, daring, dashing, they're free as the breeze, go where it blows, pursuing these goals as though they're everlasting, and they're open for anything except those square holy joes. It's possible, I'm not sure, I may have wrote some of this in response to an incident at Key West. I had a Christian friend, he was married, and I was newly married as well, and so we had no kids, and we lived in Fort Lauderdale, and he showed up one morning, and let's go to Key West. Like, Shelby, I've got all these things I need to do. Next thing you know, we're driving to Key West. We wound up as far south as you can go and be in the United States. And on this pier, as the sun was setting, everybody was doing all kinds of activities where anything would go. They were dancing and cracking coconuts and selling them for 50 cents, and just this celebration to the sun and the sunset going down. And you would have to be there, but I think you get an idea of the picture of what was going on. It was just as free and accepting of anything and everything. Well, there was a fellow sitting there that had sunglasses on, and he had a little can out in front of him. He's beating on a drum and singing. He was supposedly blind. So I put a buck or two in there, I don't know, and he said, let me sing you a song. And I said, well, no. I said, look, you don't have to do that. Well, he starts playing this song to me, and it was about he fell in love with a girl. He told his daddy how he's going to marry this girl, and daddy said, oh, son, your mama didn't know it, but that's her sister. Well, then the next part is he falls in love with another girl, and he tells his mama, I'm in love with her, I want to marry her. Oh, son, you can't do that. Your daddy doesn't know this, but that's actually your sister. Of course, they'd be half sisters. And so I'm standing there, and he's singing this thing, and I had a decision to make. Either think this is real cute and funny and everybody laughs, or he got done and I said, well, the Bible says that in the last days, men will go from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. And I'm telling you, it was like a bomb dropped. This guy then launched into a song about death and hell, and it's just a mockery song. And he gets done, and I had a choice to make, either back down, or as he got finished, I said, well, the Bible says it's appointed for man to die once, and then comes the judgment. And again, it was just like a bomb going off. All of this explosion started happening, people all around. It's hard to explain exactly what happened, but I decided I was not going to move from that place I was at, because there's all this aggression that started coming in. One guy come up to me at one point and said, look, you've made your point here, you can go. And I said, I'm not going anywhere till this is done, whatever's going on here. Shelby, my ex-wife, and Shelby's wife, they'd gone back to the van. He was afraid they were going to throw me off the pier. And so I'd worked with him at a street gospel mission, and all of a sudden he realized Robin isn't going anywhere. So he grabbed the two ladies and himself and got a bunch of tracts and came right back down there and started giving tracts out to everybody. And this went on for at least an hour, maybe longer, because it was light when this started, and it was well past dark before I knew it was finally over. Finally, the explosions that were going on there spiritually were finished. And I remember at one point, the guy that had been beating the drum and singing those songs, I looked over at him, and he had one of those tracts, and he was sitting there reading it. So they're open for anything except those square holy joes. And see, that's another thing that's amazing. Sin has so messed us up that the one avenue out is the last avenue sinners want anything to do with. That includes myself. You look for every other avenue out if you are looking for an out, and the last thing you look at is what is the only way out, the only sin payment that can remove our problem we have with God, to where then we have access to God, and God has no case against us. That's what Jesus has done. He died to pay for our sins, but that's the last place we want to go. We're open for anything except that, because it seems narrow, and it is a narrow gate, a narrow way, but his commands are exceedingly broad. The depths and the breadths are unfathomable. And I've been at this for over 40 years. In fact, I wrote this song in '84. So this is 2021, so that was 37 years ago. Then I break into I don't know if you want to call it a chorus, it's a bridge. Sinners, sinners, living on death row, each step's one closer to death angels' blow. Everyone not believing on the slain, risen Son is damned already. We know they're living on death row. This thing is just packed. Listen to what Jesus said after, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. He who believes in him is not judged. He who does not believe has been judged already, or stands judged or condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. He said in the verse before, God did not send the Son into the world to damn the world or judge the world, but that the world should be saved through him. Because we're already judged. We're already condemned. We already stand guilty. We're already doomed. As far as the death angels blow, there are times God will send an angel and boom, you're cut down, that's it. That's in Moses, Herod. The angel of the Lord struck him and he's eaten with worms and he died. But everyone not believing on the slain risen Son is damned already. We know they're living on death row. A lot of people will say that Jesus died and paid for everybody's sins. Oh, except the sin of not accepting him. So he didn't really pay for all the sins, because that would be a sin, either a sin of neglect or sin of rejection. That's not paid for, but every other one's paid for. But it's a gift from God. You got to receive the gift in order to get it. Look, if you don't receive it and you've neglected it, is that righteousness or is that a sin? If it's sin and all the sins are paid for, then there's no problem. Also, there's no need to evangelize if he paid for everybody's sins. But the truth is, anybody that's never heard of any of this material, they'll be judged according to their conscience of what they knew was right or wrong. It talks about that in Romans. And if people have had the law of Moses, that standard will be applied. And then hearing the gospel, that is another level of accountability. But God will only hold you accountable for what you had access to, and will be judged according to our deeds. Not according to what we didn't know or didn't have access to, but according to what we did know. So our conscience will be judged by, if that's all the gauge that we've had of what's right or wrong. If you've had access to the Hebrew scriptures and that's it, then that enters into the picture as part of your accountability. And then if you've heard the gospel, then that's another level of accountability. But God will only hold us accountable for what we've heard and rejected. But everybody is damned. That's why Jesus came into the world. Now go back to basically more of the same of pleasures, more pleasures. Making for such a pleasing season. It all feels so good, it just can't be wrong. To the pleasures of the flesh, let's sing us another song. But faith knows, faith knows. Faith knows the curtain's coming, faith knows. Fame and fortune, riding high. At your command, anything money can buy. Laughing, living easily. Arrogance, strutting. Trusting riches, security. But faith knows, faith knows. Faith knows the curtain is coming. Faith knows. Pleasures, pleasures. Moses rejected the pleasures of sin for a season in order to endure the hardship that came along with being with the people of God. When God was talking to Israel, he says, therefore my people go into exile for their lack of knowledge. Their honorable men are famished. Their multitude is parched with thirst. In other words, no knowledge of God. Therefore Sheol has enlarged its throat and opened its mouth without measure. In Jerusalem's splendor, her multitude, her den of revelry, partying, and the jubilant within her descend. Does that sound familiar? Just big partying, so everybody's happy, and they're open for anything except those square holy Joes. When both of my daughters were young, and they would call me, I'd always answer the phone and say, Joe's Eatery and Pizzeria, eat at Joe's. How can I help you? I think that's the way I'd say it. And they go, come on, Dad. Well, when Claire, my youngest, was in Nashville, here it is. She sees a big thing, eat at Joe's. They thought I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, anyway, I put that in this part of the video on YouTube, eat at Joe's, Nashville. So it'd be like daring and dashing and like city life and partying, eat at Joe's. And that's where I had that phrase, open for anything except those square holy Joes. So I didn't plan that. That happened, and I'm typing the words in there, and I can't believe that. So I think the Lord's been encouraging me to do this, and maybe I think he's got a bit of a sense of humor. But as far as trusting riches security, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his own imagination. Riches can't save anyone. Now, money does have the ability to grant some degree of protection. Like I talk about keeping the wolf away from the door. But wisdom has the benefit of saving the life of its possessors. So to have money or riches and no God, it's like a high wall of protection only in your imagination. So I go back into the bridge, sinners, sinners, living on death row. Each step's one closer to death angel's blow. Everyone not believing in the slain risen son is damned already. We know they're living on death row. Now here's the part I want you to listen to. I did this in '84. Positions of power with great authority, your plans and purposes determining people's needs. But rejecting God's words oh so completely, with no place for Abraham's seed. But faith knows the curtain is coming. One world system looks like it's coming soon, decked out in glorious splendor, clothed in scarlet, golden cup in hand, all nations of her a member. But faith knows this is death's final show. Faith knows these are lit by death's last little glow. Faith knows the curtain's coming to stop that show. Faith knows those performers are on death row. Down will come her tower. stripped of her power. Fire will be her shower, and her death blows are but an hour. Oh, there's so many things faith knows. Now, I don't claim to know prophetic material of exactly what all is going to happen, but there's Babylon in the Revelation, and she's drunk with the blood of the saints. She's wealthy and makes the people of the world wealthy, but she's exceedingly immoral. And the things that I'm hearing from alternative media, truth seekers that are called conspiracy theorists, they're uncovering all kinds of things that the deep state or the cabal or the elites have been doing that is exceedingly vile stuff. It has to do with child trafficking, even child sacrifice, drugs, all kinds of matters that are just unspeakable. And they're saying this is all going to come out, and this elite group, positions of power, and they have great authority, and they're abusing the people all over the world with their propaganda narratives that are just nothing but lies. And this is all going to come out, that their plans and purposes are determining people's needs. They're wanting to decide how many people should be on the planet, where people should live, who can buy, who can sell. But they reject God's words so completely, with no place for Abraham's seed. Abraham's seed are people of the faith. Abraham was reckoned righteous before God because he believed God. And we are Abraham's seed in that we have believed God. But there's no place for Abraham's seed. Last thing in the video, talking about this is death's final show, down will come her tower. I was driving to a job and I looked over and here's this tower that was down. And I thought, golly, here I'm working on this song. I don't know, it's kind of a flimsy little tower. It doesn't really look that great. But I went on to my job. Well, I came back the same way and I thought I'll just take a couple pictures of it. And now I just love it because it is frail, it is knocked over. And down will come her tower, stripped of her power. Fire will be her shower. Her death blows are but an hour. But that tower falling over, it's just a perfect symbol of this false governance system that has decided to oppose God. It has no hope of standing, and it's just easily knocked over by God. And I said, her death blows are but an hour. Well, I don't want her death blows, and that hour can be an awful long time. But it is but an hour. In fact, we're even told that little children, this is the last hour. That was what John wrote 2,000 years ago. So her death blows. They are death, and they would be blows, but they're but an hour. She won't be allowed to have her way for eternity. I think the last thing I want to say, there's a guy named Simon Parks. He's one of these truth seekers. And one thing he did mention, even though he believes in reincarnation and all kinds of things, but he is familiar with the Bible. And he talked about the Revelation and how dark it is. And he made the point that he thought that humanity could turn to him in such a way that God would relent on those judgments, and that wouldn't be there. It'd actually be coming into an age of light, from darkness into light. And I've often thought, that is a possibility. Now, we don't want to add to God's words in the Revelation, so it may come out where it's going to be as dark as it appears that it is, that that's the way it's going to be. But I also know that Jonah, when he went through Nineveh, 3 days walk, yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. There was no hint that it was even remotely possible that God would not destroy them. And yet the king said, everybody put on sackcloth, turn away from your wickedness. Who knows? Maybe God will relent concerning this calamity that he's pronounced upon us. And says God saw their deeds and he did relent. And Jonah got mad as fire because Jonah said, I knew you were like that. I knew that they repented, that you wouldn't squash them like a bug, and I wanted you to kill them all because they're arch enemies to us. And God said, look, you had mercy on this little plant that grew over your head that you didn't work for or anything else. There's 120,000 people in Nineveh that don't know their right hand from their left. It means children everywhere, as well as many animals. Shouldn't I have compassion on them? That's how the book ends. I think it is possible that God may grant a great reprieve, not only to this nation that I live in, but to the entire world. And that's what I'm hoping and looking for. And I'm hoping that it'll be a time where persuasion of these matters will be greatly enhanced and a lot of barriers taken out of the way to let people investigate the Bible and its claims for themselves without harassment, just like I was able to do. A lot of Christians say, oh, persecution is great because then the church just goes like wildfire when it's squashed like that. You know, it just grows and grows. Well, in the Middle East, there are a lot of places Christians have been persecuted and has not grown. And I don't buy that kind of thinking anyway. Can God do things when there's tremendous persecution going on? Yes, He can. But He can also do great things when there's prosperity and peace. And I'm an example of that. So that's what I'm hoping for, working for, and praying for. I want God to be God, and I want Him to do what He says He's going to do. But I also know that He warns, and if we respond correctly, He can, and often, in fact, probably always, will withdraw a determination that He's made for either discipline or destruction. So I have great hope and great optimism. And the way that I approach it, and I want to close with this, is I'm saying, Father, You alone know what Jesus did to secure pardon possibility for us. And people need to hear that message. They need time to investigate. They need time to think. They need time to ask questions. They need time to work through your claims and be convinced, persuaded that you are correct, so that they can enter in the faith, which is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things that are not yet seen, that your words are true, that Jesus is indeed the King of all the kings. He has an eternal kingdom that He is building. He is bringing people into it, for He delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of our sins. And Jesus Himself is the image of the invisible God. He's the firstborn of all creation. And in Him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. I'm hoping God is going to grant a tremendous reprieve and reveal His Son to massive numbers of sinners, because that's who Jesus came for, where sinners then will not be on death row, but they will be transferred onto the King's highway, transferred into the eternal kingdom. I'm going to stop there. Faith knows. Gosh, there's so many things. Faith knows. I want you to grow in that. I want you to listen to these materials, this book. You listen, and you will learn, as I said it over and over, great and mighty things that you do not know. His commands are exceedingly broad. He wants to enlighten us. He wants to teach us great and mighty things that we do not know. When God says great and mighty things, that in itself is a massive understatement of what He wants to teach us. But you've got to listen, and you've got to apply yourself, and you've got to ask Him questions. You've got to seek Him with your whole heart. And when you listen, you will learn those things. And when you learn these things, you have assurance of things you're hoping for, where you can stand under those things with confidence, conviction of things that are not seen, that aren't yet seen. All things have been subjected to Him. We do not yet see all things subject to Him, but that time is coming. And so our faith knows. And with that knowledge of a true biblical faith, we will indeed